Hi, I'm Ken Ham, President of Answers in Genesis, the Creation Museum, and the Ark Encounter. The Ark is opening July 7. We're recording this just a couple of weeks before then. Have with me Joe Boone, our VP of Advancement. And Joe, it's a thrill to be able to explain to our supporters what has happened over the past few years.
Yeah, it's been a miracle, and it's an exciting journey that we've been on, and to see the Lord provide through all of this as well.
But Joe, I sort of feel like, I don't know, I feel like I'm an athlete that's gone through one of those races where you do all these different things.
The decathlon.
Yeah, something like that, because we have really traveled a long way.
Absolutely.
And we've come a long way too. But fundraising for the Ark, It started how long ago?
It started over 6 years ago, in early 2010, kind of really kicked off with the official announcement in December of 2010.
So we've been raising funds for the Ark for 6 years. Feels like millions of years.
It does feel like millions of years.
And now we're at the stage where the Ark's going to open, July 7, 2016, the opening date, and we've raised, well, God's the one that raised it.
That's right.
Not us. But we went out there and just shared with people the vision, the burden, and how much did we raise?
Well, including the bonds and all the donations, around $100 million.
$100 million. How much in donations?
In donations, about 34 million in donations. It's been really amazing.
How many people donated to the Ark project?
Well, it's interesting. We received close to 125,000 gifts from people in all 50 states and over 40 countries around the world.
So not just people from America.
That's right.
That is great.
So 43,000 individuals and families gave those gifts from literally all over the world.
So there's a donation aspect, and there was also the bond offering aspect.
That's right.
And you know, along the way, we had all sorts of struggles. I mean, we look back now and we say, wow, look what God has done. And we just want to thank our supporters. He brought thousands of people together, not just the architects and the engineers and all the contractors and the Amish craftsmen and the designers and our staff here, but the thousands of people who are a part of this.
Yes.
And
yeah,
we had some interesting battles though, didn't we?
Well, we have had some interesting battles along the way. As you're well aware, we had to change some plans along the way because of a tax that we got and laws that changed, and we ended up with the bond offering, which ended up being a blessing because many more people could participate in the support of the Ark from that aspect. But even through that, we encountered challenges that we never anticipated. Attacks from different organizations, anti-Christian organizations that tried to stop it or influence it in a negative way. It was quite the battle.
Well, you know, as we have come through all of that, we can look back now and smile, but there were times when it was like the Israelites at the Red Sea, and you're saying, unless the Lord parts the water and allows a path through, there's no escape here.
That's right, and you probably remember when we got to the time at which we needed to have the minimum amount raised for the bonds in order to actually close that bond offering and move forward. That was in February of 2014.
I remember that, and I remember we got to a stage where we had to have $13 million come in 1 week.
That's right.
And we said, how can that happen? I remember talking to you and saying, you know what, the only way this can happen if God is in this. I mean, I don't, how could you ever raise that much money in 1 week, $13 million,
That's
and
right.
What happened?
Well, and from a humanly perspective, we couldn't have done it.
Right.
And we shared the opportunities, we shared our needs with our supporters from around the country, and the Lord just opened the floodgates. And within that 1 week period, in fact, leading up to within literally a few minutes of when we needed to close the day on when all of those amounts needed to be reported to the trustee in order to close that bond offering, the amounts came in right up to the final time, and boom, we were able to reach the minimum goal.
You know, God promises to provide our needs. There are times when I wish you'd provide it a little more quickly or a little bit more in advance or something like that, because we were right on the edge there. And I remember you telling me, within a few minutes of the closing, it was all finalized. We had the bond offering money in. And of course, then we were raising the donations too.
Right.
And we traveled all across the USA and many different states, and many people that came to those dinners, desserts, and we met many people and shared the vision. Our responsibility, share what we're doing and show people what's happening, and then we trust God's sovereignty to burden them to give.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I look back to see how many fundraising events we did over the time. Do you realize we did 158 fundraising events?
Oh, really?
All across the country.
No wonder I have diamond status with Delta Airlines.
That's right. We had a lot of chicken dinners over those years.
Yeah, I remember that. A lot of dead chicken.
That's right.
But as we were out there sharing with people about the Ark, we also shared with them ways in which they can support through sponsoring pegs,
That's right.
Beams, planks. Tell us a little bit about the stats of how that went.
Yeah, quite amazing. Just like the number of donations, well, a number of support for the beams and the planks, but overwhelmingly, we had around 15,000 pegs sponsored within the Ark. Just way beyond where we ever thought, but 15,000 pegs.
15,000 pegs. And you know, when we first started out, I'm going to have to confess this to people watching this, and I hope they understand. When we first started out, we were actually going to have wooden pegs in the beams in the Ark, but a little different to Noah's day. We have certain codes today, and we were not permitted to use wooden pegs, even though they would have worked.
They would have structurally worked.
From a perspective of this is going to be designed as a ship, but built as a building, we have to build it to certain codes. And so for many of those pegs, we had to use big steel bolts that were specially made. So I came up with the name, if I remember, of peg bolts.
Peg bolts, that's right. So a lot of people may have sponsored a peg, but they also probably sponsored a peg bolt too.
A peg bolt as well. And then what about the planks?
Yeah, the planks. That was like the planking that's on the side of the Ark. It's called shiplap, as you know. But the planks, over 4,200 of those were sponsored. And inside of the Ark, the big beams that are in there, we had over 700 beams sponsored.
Those big beams.
Yes.
And they are massive beams too when people go in there. And how will they see their name associated with a beam or a plank or a peg?
Well, actually, yeah, they'll be able to go online. In fact, anyone who sponsored a peg, plank, or beam got a certificate that had a serial number on it. In fact, our web team is working on finishing it right now to where in a few weeks, sometime soon after the opening of the Ark, you'll be able to go online and key in that serial number and see where your peg, plank, or beam is located within the Ark.
Now also, there were quite a number of people who took advantage of the boarding passes, which is something that's unique, that is a lifetime entry for them and their family, or there was different sorts of boarding passes actually. But how many people obtained boarding passes?
Over 3,600 had purchased an individual or family or grandparent or one of the 3-year and lifetime type of boarding passes.
Pastors boarding passes?
Pastor boarding passes as well. So a number of different ways that people participated. All of that coming together in just a miraculous way, really, to be at the point that we're at now. In fact, the funding, the $100 million, the last amount of what we needed for this initial phase 1 was raised here just a few days ago, a few weeks before we opened the Ark.
Wow, we just praise the Lord for that. And you know, as I think about it, we stepped out in faith. Now, the secular world look on what we do as risk-taking.
Right.
But it wasn't risk-taking in that way. It was stepping out in faith. But at the same time, we had done our research. I mean, we had America's Research Group do a general population study. If we built a life-size Ark, would people come? And we found out that they predicted up to 2 million people a year, very much likely to come. We actually repeated that research and obtained the same sorts of results. So about 2 million people a year would come. If they're going to come, and this is so well known around the world, which it is, Noah's Ark is well known around the world, then we step out in faith to do it. If God's really called us to do this, He's going to provide along the way. And we've just seen miracle after miracle after miracle. In fact, I was just interviewed by a national newspaper that's very well known, just before we sat down to talk about the funding. And one of the questions I was asked concerned, how did all this happen? How did it come about? And I said, you have to stand back and recognize it's a miracle.
It is.
I mean, we had to find an architect who knew how to design a timber frame structure, to design this as a wooden ship, but build it as a building.
Right.
And we found Leroy Troyer, who grew up in the Amish and Mennonite communities, thought about timber framing all his life, who had designed what had been, up until this time, the biggest timber frame structure in America, and the Amish craftsmen that actually built that. And I talked to the leaders of the crew that built that, and they wanted to be a part of this ark because of the Christian message. They said they wouldn't do it for anybody else.
That's right.
And then the mill in Colorado, the only one in America that has the biggest CNC machine to be able to get the timbers ready, and then to be able to tame the timbers, and then the designers, the fabricators, the sculptors, to all come together, our staff, the thousands and thousands of supporters out there. You think about how God had to bring all these people from different backgrounds together at this time in a particular way to enable this to happen. That's why when I was just preaching at a church recently and showing pictures of this, I had one gentleman come out with his wife, and he said, "We are witnessing a miracle in our lives." He said, "I didn't think we'd ever see a real miracle from God in our lifetime. We're seeing a real miracle." And it really is a miracle, isn't it?
It is. It's incredible. I mean, and you think about Patrick Marsh and his team, the creative team that designed the exhibits. How much did they have to work with to do those exhibits?
It was like $10 million or so.
Like $10 million. And to do what they did, I mean...
The secular world would spend $10 million on half an exhibit.
That's right.
Let alone 3 decks filled with world-class exhibits. I don't even know how they did it. But these people could have earned a lot more in Hollywood, other places, but they, like Patrick, have a burden to use their talents for the Lord.
Well, and I'm just so thrilled with the stewardship that Answers in Genesis, the Ark Encounter Creation Museum, puts into the resources that the Lord has provided us. I mean, for instance, even raising this money, I've had people ask me, well, you must have dozens of people on staff to raise these kind of funds. And I just chuckle because, full-time advancement staff in our department is less than 10. And I know people would generally recognize some of our advancement officers out in the field, like Vicki and Cecil and Andy and Jason and Jeff. And then there's just a handful of just very talented, organized people behind the scenes who have made all of these things happen. From Rhonda, Carlotta, Christelle, Kim, Carol, Jen, all led by Joetta. It's an amazing team that in any other organization would have been substantially more in staff. But we even wondered, how are we going to raise all of these funds? Well, it's not us that's doing it. We share the responsibility, like you said. It's our responsibility to share what the needs of the project are, the vision of the project, and then the Lord provides, and that's what we've seen happen.
And Joe, there'll be a lot of people thinking, wow, you got to that $100 million mark, and the Lord has provided the bond offering and the donations. So, well, you and Joe can now relax. But we can't relax.
No, there's a lot more to be done.
Well, the other thing is that the research, that America's research conducted, predicted that the attendance at the Creation Museum would at least double.
Yes.
From 300,000 a year to 607,100 a year or more. And then we realized we don't have enough parking at the Creation Museum.
Or enough space for everybody who
wants to come. We don't have enough space for everybody. So now we had to step out in faith again, risk-taking? No,
That's
stepping out in faith, because if God has brought us this far, He's going to help us solve this problem too.
That's exactly.
And so we're putting in another big parking lot. We already went through rezoning. We got all the permissions for that, and we're putting in 1,200 extra car spaces here. And we want to expand the museum too, because now there's going to be a lot more people coming in to the area, coming to the Ark. That's going to generate a lot more people coming to the museum. We want to have a lot more teaching available for people.
That's right.
So we want to build another big building on the current parking lot that we have at the Creation Museum to expand the Creation Museum and all the teaching. We've already been given some world-class items
Yeah, it's
that we
amazing.
could put in the Creation Museum to expand it. So we're just going to keep moving ahead, right?
That's right. It's exciting.
And by the way, then there's phase 2, the walled city at the
course.
Ark, and then phase 3, the Tower of Babel, and then phase 4, the first century
Century
village.
village.
And so it goes on.
That's
So
right.
we're going to be increasing that and this. Do you realize the Lord has allowed us the privilege, the honor, the blessing of being involved with 2 of the greatest Christian themed attractions of our era to reach people around the world with the gospel?
It's an honor to be a part of what the Lord is doing here at Answers in Genesis, the Ark and the Creation Museum. And we just can't wait to see what the Lord is going to do next through all of this.
You know, I remind people that even though we look at our culture and see it collapsing from a Christian worldview perspective, it's easy to get depressed. But we shouldn't be looking at that. What we should be saying is, what does God tell us to do? To do business till He comes, the business of the King. To be on about the business of the King of Kings, which is to preach the gospel, to make disciples, contend for the faith, give answers for what we believe. How do you go out and preach the gospel to the world?
That's right.
We built these 2 attractions. The Lord has enabled us to be a part of this. When I say we, I mean all of our supporters, all of our staff. The Lord has used all of us involved here to build these 2 major Christian-themed attractions to bring the world here,
Yeah.
to impact them for the Lord Jesus Christ.
Yeah. It's wonderful, and it's exciting. And I know for our supporters, I've had many share with me, they're excited to be able to steward their resources here to store up treasures in heaven, because they know that the eternal impact that's going to come from their investments is more significant than anything that they could receive from an earthly type of return.
I mean, what price can you put on just one person who commits their lives to the Lord and will spend eternity with the Lord Jesus Christ?
That's right.
And we've already heard many such testimonies as a result of the Creation Museum and many other aspects of our ministry. I've already heard of one contractor who, just being involved in building the Ark and talking to others who were there, becoming a Christian.
It's wonderful.
And who knows what else is going to happen here. I just am really thrilled to be a part of this. And I really want to thank all of our supporters out there, because this couldn't have happened without all of you. Thousands of people that are involved. And Joe, I know you've met many of them out there.
That's right. Yes, it is truly an honor to be a part of what is happening here with the Ark Encounter. And for our supporters, I know just as much as me are so thrilled that this day is here with the opening of the Ark, and to see the impact that it's going to have in the future for millions of lives, millions of souls for eternity. And I just personally want to say thank you for being a part of what is happening here.